After a black woman CEO experienced denial of service at her bank, she maintained composure. Within 5 minutes, the manager responsible for the incident was terminated. The errand was intended to be brief, approximately 10 to 15 minutes, a task easily managed between scheduled meetings. That morning, Nadira Langston, aged 48, the head of a multi-million-dollar tech firm located in Phoenix, Arizona, exited her driver's black Lincoln and entered Sycamore First Bank, carrying her company's banking portfolio carefully. She was unhurried. There was no need for haste. Her schedule had been completely free to allow her to complete the transfer of a substantial business account, which was one of several her company had been relocating for months. The account manager she typically collaborated with had retired, and today she was meeting the new team in person to finalize the documents. A simple, standard procedure. Her navy blue suit was expertly tailored. Her hair was styled in a neat, low bun, and she wore diamond studs in her ears. Understated, yet refined. Her heels made no clicking sound as she moved. They barely rustled. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had held a position of authority for a significant period and no longer felt the need to demonstrate it. Approaching the reception desk, she provided her name, Nadira Langston. She explained she was there to meet with someone from the commercial accounts department. The young woman at the counter glanced up, briefly nodding while entering information into the system. Okay, just a moment. It was then that things began. A woman, appearing to be in her mid-50s, with pale blonde hair and a rigid posture, emerged from a nearby glass office and walked over, offering a smile that seemed strained. "Can I help you with something?" she inquired. Her voice was concise. Nadira turned and offered her hand. "Yes, thank you. I'm Nadira Langston. I understand I'm scheduled to meet with someone from the business team. I'm completing a transfer." The woman didn't return the handshake. She looked at the folder Nadira held. "And you are representing which company?" "I'm the CEO of Bluestone Dynamics." The account was previously managed by Peter Larson before his retirement. The manager raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "And you're here, unaccompanied?" "Yes," Nadira responded calmly. "It's a private matter." A pause followed, one of those pauses that conveys more than a complete sentence, the kind where judgment is disguised as confusion. "Right?" the woman said, adjusting her position. "We generally don't permit walk-ins for high-tier accounts unless it has been arranged beforehand." Nadira stated, still calm. She retrieved the confirmation email. "Here's the appointment confirmation from your internal scheduler. Today, 9:30 a.m. The woman looked at the document, then back at Nadira. "Are you certain this wasn't intended for another employee at your organization?" Nadira blinked, deliberately and slowly. "I operate the company." A brief silence followed. "My name is Cheryl Bainbridge. I'm the branch manager. We're dealing with some concerning events lately. Individuals have been falsely presenting their credentials to gain access to valuable accounts. You appreciate the seriousness of this, I'm sure." Nadira fully grasped the situation. "Cheryl, is it?" she replied, her tone remaining calm and measured. "Offering my license, corporate ID, and the transaction papers I'm here to approve?" Cheryl's smile became strained. "It's simply procedure, Ms. Langston. Please don't view it as directed at you." Nadira had encountered that phrase on countless occasions, in numerous boardrooms, airport lounges, and hotel lobbies. However, before she could add anything, Cheryl motioned to the receptionist. "Could you please contact security?" Just to err on the side of caution. It was necessary to confirm her statements. Nadira's mouth remained still. Her tone remained consistent. "Are you summoning security?" she asked. "On the CEO of one of our most important prospective clients?" Cheryl's shoulders became even more rigid. "I didn't suggest that," I replied. "I simply stated we needed to verify." At that moment, a subtle change occurred within the room. A quiet hum arose from a man seated in the waiting area. A brief look passed between two tellers positioned behind the counter. A palpable shift occurred. It was evident Nadira had followed every procedure correctly, yet she was still being made to feel like an outsider. Nadira, however, was not prepared to accept the situation. Not this time. The bank lobby wasn't crowded. but sufficient people were present to observe the unfolding events. An older man, waiting in line, moved uncomfortably. A woman seated close to the loan office took out her phone, feigning a check of her email, but her gaze remained fixed on Nadira and Cheryl. The security guard was not yet present, but Cheryl remained steadfast, as if anticipating immediate reinforcement. Nadira carefully opened her folder. It contained all necessary documentation to confirm her identity: business cards, certified articles of incorporation, 2 forms of identification, and the bank's own records confirming the account transfer. She arranged them on the reception desk methodically, similar to a card dealer. Composed. Accurate. Here, she stated, that is my Arizona state ID. This document confirms my company's EIN. It includes the board resolution authorizing me as the account signer. In this, she indicated the final sheet, is your bank's welcome letter. Cheryl briefly reviewed the papers. Anyone can print documents, she stated, crossing her arms. I've worked in banking for 27 years. I've seen people pretend to be CFOs, consultants, even heirs to estates. We don't make exceptions just because someone claims they're important. Nadira's tone remained steady, but her eyes narrowed. So this isn't about the paperwork. It's about how I appear, correct? Cheryl let out a dismissive sound. I beg your pardon. You heard me. If I presented myself as a 55-year-old man in a Brooks Brothers suit, you'd be extending a handshake and offering coffee. Ma'am, please reduce your voice volume. Nadira responded. My voice is already subdued, her words sharp and clear. I am the CEO. You have reviewed the documents. You know my name. The only thing that seemed to register was that I wasn't what they anticipated. A silence followed. A protracted, uncomfortable silence, and then Cheryl spoke. It wasn't a shout, but it carried. You just don't look like a CEO? The statement lingered, heavy as smoke after a match. Someone inhaled sharply. Another person murmured, did she really just say that? The receptionist stood motionless behind the desk. She appeared to wish she could simply vanish. Nadira's eyelids lowered deliberately, yet her voice remained steady. I have secured more than $80 million in venture capital. I have spearheaded 3 product launches. I have presented as a keynote speaker at CES and finalized agreements in 6 countries. I don't need to appear any particular way to be completely myself. Cheryl began to respond. However, before she could, Nadira shifted slightly and asked the receptionist, is there a regional director assigned to this branch? The young woman nodded hesitantly. He is present today, in fact. It's a surprise audit. He's in the back conference room. Nadira's lips formed a slight smile. Excellent. I wish to speak with him. Then, Cheryl intervened once more, visibly agitated. There's no necessity for that. I am capable of managing this. Let's avoid making the situation worse. Nadira faced her directly. You have already worsened this. You summoned security. You rejected every form of identification I presented. You challenged my position, my firm, and my credibility, all without initiating a single phone call to confirm any detail. Therefore, no, you're not capable of handling this. The room fell silent. The receptionist lifted the phone and initiated a call to an internal extension. Mr. Dorsey? She inquired. There is someone present requesting to speak with you. Her name is Nadira Langston from Bluestone Dynamics. A brief hesitation. Yes. All right. I will inform him. She ended the call and turned to Nadira, her eyes displaying surprise. He is on his way out now. Meanwhile, Cheryl remained unaware of the significant misjudgment she had made. The door situated at the rear of the bank swung open, and a tall man, dressed in a charcoal suit, emerged. He moved with a brisk, purposeful stride, alert but not hurried. He held a slim leather tablet and wore an expression suggesting displeasure at being interrupted from meetings. However, his expression softened immediately when he saw Nadira. Nadira Langston, he said, extending his hand. She shook it firmly. Yes, you must be Mr. Dorsey. He continued, Matthew Dorsey, Regional Director. I've heard a lot about you. Peter spoke very highly before he retired. We appreciate the opportunity to manage your accounts. Cheryl's mouth parted slightly, and her face paled. Matthew turned to her, appearing puzzled. Did something go wrong with the meeting? Cheryl struggled to find the right words. Yes, there was. I simply verified the credentials before providing access to the commercial suite. This follows our standard procedure. Nadira remained silent. She didn't need to. The receptionist, still positioned behind the counter, added cautiously. She contacted security, sir. She stated that we were unable to verify the client's identity. Matthew blinked. You contacted security? Regarding Ms. Langston? I was attempting to adhere to established procedures. Cheryl responded promptly. We've experienced individuals recently presenting fabricated business credentials. I prefer not to assume any risks. You understand how crucial our commercial accounts are. He gave her a direct look. Yes, I am aware. This is why we verify credentials, rather than form assessments of clients based on subjective impressions. Cheryl's shoulders tightened. Excuse me? She began. I've reviewed the compliance logs. You didn't even access the file she presented. You disregarded the scheduled appointment. You dismissed the identification. I was safeguarding the bank, she asserted. You embarrassed the bank, Matthew retorted. You've publicly humiliated one of the most significant clients we've onboarded this year. In view of customers, in view of staff, with no justification. A security guard finally arrived at the front entrance, his radio clipped to his belt, meticulously scanning the room, as if anticipating trouble. Matthew dismissed him with a wave. Everything's fine here, Eric, Cheryl repeated, her voice now trembling. False alarm. She had entered alone. Her name wasn't on the standard schedule. It was on the revised internal schedule, the one your assistant oversees. The same schedule you approve every Monday morning. You simply didn't review it, Nadira stated, stepping forward slightly, her voice low but clear. You hadn't acted without delay because of an absence. You paused because I didn't align with your preconceived notion of who should possess such authority. Matthew remained silent, allowing the quiet to linger. There was nothing further to elaborate on. Cheryl's mouth opened once more, but she spoke no words. Ms. Langston, Matthew stated, pivoting with a return to decorum. Would you be willing to accompany me? I will personally oversee your transaction from my office. Nadira acknowledged with a single nod. Certainly. They started to leave, passing the lines of desks and glass-walled offices. Cheryl stayed still by the front desk, her eyes wide, her face unreadable. No one moved towards her. The receptionist looked at her keyboard. The security guard walked away slowly, seeming unsure of what to do. Just as they were about to vanish down the hallway, Matthew halted and turned. Cheryl looked up, clearly surprised. My office. After this meeting, we'll be discussing your role here in detail. He didn't raise his voice. Wasn't necessary. However, Cheryl already sensed a change in the atmosphere. Matthew's office presented a crisp, though understated, impression. It featured clean lines, 2 chairs positioned across from his desk, and a tall window allowing morning light to spread across the carpet. Nadira waited until he invited her to sit, and even then, she maintained a straight posture and a composed demeanor. He closed the door softly, then turned back to face her. Ms. Langston, I want to apologize for what just happened. That should not have occurred. Not here. Not anywhere. You were treated unfairly, Nadira stated calmly, placing her folder on the desk. However, this isn't the first time. It probably won't be the last, Matthew responded, leaning against the edge of his desk. We have protocol for a reason, to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening. Cheryl disregarded every step. She didn't just disregard protocol, Nadira said. She formed an opinion of me immediately upon seeing my face. Matthew breathed out his nose, crossing his arms. I acknowledge that. He resumed looking at the documents she had placed before him, reviewing them without speaking. He wasn't hurried. He was carefully considering everything. Everything is in the correct order, he stated. I never questioned it. However, I do want to inquire. Did she allow you any opportunity to provide an explanation before summoning security? Not really, Nadira responded. She recognized my name, saw my face, and heard my title, yet still inquired if the appointment belonged to another person. Matthew rubbed his jaw. That will present a challenge for her. A significant one. Nadira inclined her head. I didn't intend for anyone to lose their job. I am aware of that. However, Sometimes repercussions are deserved. Immediately, his office phone vibrated. He answered, listened briefly, then instructed, send her in. A knock followed shortly, and Cheryl entered. The usual assuredness had vanished. Her face was pale, her shoulders slightly hunched. She walked as if unsure how to position her hands or where to look. Ms. Langston, she began, her voice quiet. I owe you an apology. I was mistaken. That wasn't my goal. You don't have to pretend, Nadira stated, interrupting. Her voice wasn't harsh, only resolute. You acted precisely as you did. You didn't believe I was who I claimed to be. And instead of verifying, you chose to embarrass me. Cheryl looked to Matthew, visibly wanting him to intervene. He remained silent. I've spent over 2 decades in this field. She continued, I've witnessed fraud, identity theft, all sorts of deception. And none of that pertains to me, Nadira stated. You didn't err due to caution. You err because you believed you could evade detection, Matthew finally said. Cheryl, following a review of events this morning, encompassing internal audit records and client appointment logs, I have decided to end your employment, effective immediately. Cheryl blinked. And? Are you serious? Yes, I am, Matthew replied. You breached client protocol, showed disrespect to one of our most valuable account holders, and created a public disturbance that jeopardized the bank's reputation. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a pattern, and it concludes here. She appeared ready to retaliate, but the atmosphere offered no space for her to exert herself. She faced Nadira. I didn't intend to cause you any personal offense, she said. You didn't offend me, Nadira replied softly. You showed disrespect. There's a distinction. Cheryl lowered her gaze, then pivoted, exited the doorway, and left it slightly open. Matthew remained still for a moment. Subsequently, he settled into his desk chair and raised his head. I trust that achieves a degree of responsibility. This is a beginning, Nadira responded. However, beyond the confines of that office, the narrative was quickly moving away from the bank. Information doesn't spread rapidly within a bank, except when a significant event occurs. And what unfolded that morning at Sycamore was not merely significant, it was irrefutable. As Nadira and Matthew left the office, the ambience in the lobby had fundamentally changed. Patrons remained silent. Tellers murmured behind their workstations. Cheryl's absence was more pronounced than her presence had ever been. The nameplate had already been taken from the front glass office, as if she had never worked there. Matthew walked Nadira out personally. I'll ensure the rest of the paperwork is managed by someone capable, he said. You shouldn't have to experience this level of absurdity. Ever. Nadira nodded. Accepting the folder, he returned to her. The paperwork is the straightforward part, she replied. He gave a quiet, respectful laugh. Indeed, they arrived at the front doors, where 2 customers graciously held them open. A teller rose from behind the counter and offered a small wave, hesitant yet genuine. The sun was ascending higher above Phoenix. The air was dry, and the pavement was warm. Nadira hesitated close to the curb, her driver advancing, the car door already ajar. She glanced back at Matthew. A statement you made in your office resonated with me, that occasionally consequences are deserved. He affirmed this with a nod. Yes, I agree, she stated. But repercussions lacking comprehension do little to affect change. Matthew lifted his eyebrows, showing interest. I don't want Cheryl to experience hardship, Nadira proceeded. I need people to understand this wasn't about me. This occurs for Black professionals, particularly women, on a daily basis. It happens at airports, restaurants, stores, and meetings. And frequently, no one faces termination. They're simply disregarded. Again and again, he remained silent. He allowed her to continue. Perhaps for the first time, someone like him genuinely listened. If the bank is to address this with seriousness, she stated, refrain from simply publishing a statement online. Avoid issuing a standard apology. Initiate a dialogue. Instruct your managers regarding the oversights made. Prevent this from recurring for the next woman who enters that establishment. Matthew inhaled deeply, his posture now slightly more burdened. You are correct. I am unable to reverse the events that transpired. However, I can ensure they contribute to a positive outcome. That's the true measure, isn't it? Nadira responded. Not what one accomplishes with an audience, but what one alters when unobserved. She entered the vehicle, and the door closed behind her. The interior was quiet, but the silence felt clean. Her driver glanced back through the mirror. Everything satisfactory, Ms. Langston? She looked at her hands, then out the window at the glass facade of the bank. Cheryl had resolved to ignore her. The crucial decision, the one that would have significant impact, had already been made by someone else. Yes, it has, she said softly. Nadira didn't know that within 24 hours the entire country would be discussing what transpired inside that branch. It began with a tweet, just a few lines from someone who had been sitting near the loan officer's desk that morning. Just witnessed a black woman CEO get denied service at her own bank. She remained composed, publicly addressed the bias, and the manager was terminated immediately. I don't know her name, but I won't forget her demeanor. By lunchtime, the tweet had surpassed 40,000 likes. By evening, it appeared on Instagram, then Facebook, and subsequently on local news. A local blogger identified Nadira's name by comparing information with a press release Bluestone Dynamics released earlier that month. A Phoenix reporter verified the information with the bank. By nightfall, Nadira Langston was trending across the nation. She made no public statements. Wasn't necessary. Others shared their experiences. LinkedIn was filled with accolades. Corporate professionals, frequently black women, recounted similar situations, being questioned at the valet of their own office buildings, asked to show ID 3 times before boarding first-class flights, being addressed as sweetie, even while leading negotiations worth millions. People described Nadira as graceful, resilient, and composed. However, those who understood the situation better explained that it was more than grace. It was a matter of survival. Simultaneously, Sycamore First corporate headquarters mobilized. Within 24 hours, they issued a statement recognizing the incident, confirming Cheryl Bainbridge's departure from employment, and affirming the company's dedication to equity and continued training. This response proved insufficient for the public. Numerous comments appeared, questioning how many other Cheryls remain working in your branches. And do your executives grasp that implicit bias training cannot address issues permitted by your hiring processes? Black women should not be expected to remain composed when facing disrespect. Nadira made no public statements regarding the situation until 3 days later when she consented to an interview on a podcast hosted by a longtime friend and business strategist, Leona Bates. They faced each other in a silent studio in Tempe, with microphones activated and without any prepared notes. Leona began softly, asking, "You've remained silent while the internet has erupted. What prompted this response now?" Nadira answered, "Because the matter is no longer about me." Leona focused on what this situation highlighted. Specifically, that despite possessing the correct titles, documents, and credentials, people still perceive you as an outsider. Speaking out is then labeled as causing a disturbance, while remaining quiet is interpreted as agreement. It's a draining predicament, regardless of the choice. They discussed the matter for almost an hour, extending beyond the bank to address the significant emotional burden of maneuvering within established hierarchies while burdened by long-standing prejudices. Nadira remained composed. She didn't express sadness or frustration. Instead, she simply stated the facts, clearly, steadily, and without question. Following the broadcast, a fresh surge of interest emerged. This interest was authentic, thoughtful, and not superficial. Fellow CEOs contacted her. Business publications featured the narrative. A headline declared, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar." Nevertheless, Nadira maintained a grounded perspective. She did not desire recognition. She sought transformation. And she understood that meaningful change rarely appears in news headlines. The bias appeared in hiring practices, policy decisions, and even in determining who was initially believed. Even after the initial news coverage faded and the events became part of collective memory, those who witnessed her that morning at the bank still remembered what they saw. A few weeks later, Nadira addressed a room full of college students at Arizona State University. She had not intended to give any public speeches that season, as her schedule was already very full. When a business ethics professor contacted her and requested a conversation with her class, she readily agreed. The event was understated. There were no stage lights or press coverage, just 40 students, some taking notes in notebooks, others using laptops, eager to hear from the woman whose experience transformed a regular bank visit into a nationwide conversation. She presented no slides. There was no podium. She simply walked to the room's front, paused, and began speaking. "I won't be telling a storybook narrative," she stated. "I won't be suggesting that if you labor diligently, no one will challenge you, because that isn't invariably accurate." The room fell silent, all attentive. You can possess the title, the suit, the contracts, the track record, and still be informed that you don't belong, not due to any failings on your part, but because someone else cannot envision your triumph without a face resembling their own. She surveyed the room. Her voice remained gentle, but each word resonated. And in those moments, a choice presents itself. Do you contract to ease their discomfort, or do you maintain your full presence, even if it creates tension in the space? A young man seated in the front row raised his hand. He asked, "How did you manage to remain composed during that experience? Weren't you feeling anger?" Nadira responded with a slow nod. "Naturally, I was. But anger is only valuable if you understand how to channel it. That day, I employed it to remain grounded. I employed that tactic to ensure she couldn't dismiss me without looking me in the eye while doing it." Another hand then rose, this time from a young woman. "What advice would you offer someone just beginning, who hasn't developed a resume like yours?" Nadira hesitated. "Recognize your value before anyone else attempts to define it for you. And if they try to diminish you, speak regardless, even if your voice trembles." There is a certain quality to her delivery, as if she were addressing herself as much as the listener. Following the presentation, students formed a line to express their gratitude. Some simply desired to shake her hand. Others sought guidance. One young woman, speaking softly, shared, "I'm studying engineering. I'm considering dropping out. I didn't believe there was a place for someone with my background." Nadira responded, making direct eye contact, "There is. And if there isn't, create it." That evening, back in her office, Nadira found herself alone at her desk, enjoying a cup of tea. Her inbox remained full. Her phone continued to buzz. The excitement hadn't fully subsided. She understood that the public's attention would fade. However, certain individuals would retain the memory. The students, the customers present in that bank lobby, the employees who witnessed a manager lose her position due to someone's unwillingness to yield. And perhaps, in the future, when a woman like her entered a place where she wasn't anticipated, she might be greeted instead of questioned. She might be respected, all because of one moment, one voice, one refusal to remain silent. If this story resonated with you, even slightly, please share it. Change doesn't always begin with prominent demonstrations or widespread media attention. Occasionally, it originates with a composed, persistent voice that states, "This isn't right." A white student believed it would be amusing to shear a black student's hair in front of onlookers, but the reserved new student he targeted proved to possess a unique form of resilience. 13-year-old Tyrese Reddick requested little when he entered Crest Hill Middle School that Monday morning in Thousand Oaks, California. He carried his backpack, a well-used spiral notebook, and the same lunchbox he'd been using since 5th grade. His mom had written a brief message inside, as she always did, "Be yourself." That was sufficient. Tyrese felt no nervousness. He's experienced being the new student previously. 3 schools within the past 5 years, a consequence of his dad's work assisting military veterans transition to civilian life. This one didn't seem significantly different. Bright hallways, worn lockers, that familiar scratchy intercom crackle each morning. However, even before second period, he could sense the nature of this place. Students observed him. Not everyone, but a noticeable number. The long locks, carefully twisted and pulled back, distinguished him. He carried himself with quiet confidence. He avoided ostentation, opting for a simple style clean sneakers, a tucked-in shirt, and earbuds during the bus ride. Yet, his presence was noted. In Mrs. Lamar's history class, a girl with freckles whispered, "Your hair's cool." He responded with a small, appreciative nod, but remained silent. Afterward, in the cafeteria, he located an unoccupied table close to the vending machine. He was comfortable with solitude. He enjoyed watching initially, noting who laughed excessively, who moved in groups, who acted differently than they truly were. A definite pattern existed. Crest Hill operated with unwritten guidelines. There were the drama students, the sports teams, those who wore costly hoodies and spoke as if they were online personalities. And then there were those who maintained order, deciding who held significance. He noticed one of them before the sixth period began. He was tall, blonde, and boisterous, conversing with a group by the lockers, and they were all laughing excessively at something. Therese hadn't learned the boy's name yet, but he observed how other students either displayed overly enthusiastic smiles around him or avoided eye contact. Individuals of that nature were consistently the same, those who required an audience. Therese continued walking. Upon arriving home that afternoon, he placed his bag near the kitchen door. His mother was preparing red beans and rice, humming softly. "How was your first day?" she asked without turning from the stove. He shrugged. "Same as usual. Did you make any friends?" she inquired. "Not yet." His father, seated at the table in a pressed polo, looked up from his tablet. "Are people staring?" he asked. Therese paused. "Don't hesitate to address it," his dad said, his voice even. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, but you also won't allow them to take advantage of you. Do you understand?" Therese nodded. "Yeah. You're not attending that school simply to endure it. You are there to command your presence, silent if you desire, vocal if you select, but never allow anyone to define you based on their assumptions." His dad expressed himself in that manner often, not through formal talks, but through subtle guidance, valuable insights woven into the aroma of coffee or while tending to his boots in the garage. Therese paid close attention. He consistently listened. The following morning, as he secured his hair back in the mirror, he reflected on his father's words. He didn't need to create a disturbance. He simply needed to be dependable. However, even dependability couldn't prevent a storm from developing. Within the first week, Therese understood the social dynamics well. Crest Hill wasn't overtly unfriendly, but it had its nuances, those subtle cues that revealed the power structure. And centrally positioned within that was Brent Granger. Brent wasn't the largest student, but he carried himself as if he were. His dad owned and operated Granger Buick GMC, a car dealership located off the main highway, and it was well known throughout town. He habitually wore his hoodie halfway off his shoulders, kept his socks pulled up high, and had a knack for transforming every classroom into his own personal game show. Teachers put up with him. Students either adored him or actively avoided eye contact. There was no middle ground. Tyrese understood this perfectly. Brent wasn't seeking popularity. He wanted to be feared, admired, and followed. He had cultivated this reputation through a deliberate strategy, employing boisterous jokes, harsh nicknames, and ensuring he had an audience whenever he criticized someone. On Wednesday, Tyrese passed the outdoor basketball court during lunch. Brent was present with his group, Logan, Bryce, and Chadwick, all 8th graders, all known for being loud. Chadwick noticed Tyrese first. "Yo, new kid, do you play?" he yelled, spinning a ball on his finger. Tyrese continued walking, his earbuds in. Brent gave a smirk. Was he really spending that much time on his hair? The others chuckled. Tyrese remained unfazed. However, he registered every comment. Later that day, Logan brushed against him in the hallway. "Oops," he stated matter-of-factly, without acknowledging him. It wasn't accidental, it was a challenge. That night, Tyrese sat on the back porch with his dad, an ice pack on his knee. He'd received a hard elbow during PE basketball. It was the same group, insufficient for a formal report, but enough to send a message. His dad looked at him, but remained silent initially. "I'm good," Tyrese stated. "I know you are," his father responded. "But being good isn't the same as being ready." Ready for what? Tyrese pondered. He didn't desire to be the angry child. He didn't want to be a target, either. He simply wanted to be left undisturbed. However, individuals like Brent tend to recognize those who are reserved. They test and provoke, anticipating a vulnerability. And Tyrese? He remained steadfast. He was carefully considering his actions. Friday arrived. It was gym class time. The locker room before the bell consistently held a peculiar atmosphere, a combination of boisterous energy and the scent of deodorant. Tyrese was securing his shoelaces when Brent entered late, holding a pair of scissors. "New kid?" Brent called out across the room. "Did your mom forget to give you a haircut?" Tyrese remained silent, continuing to tie his shoes. "Man, you're sporting a whole jungle on your head." Several students laughed. A few appeared awkward, but offered no comment. Then Brent approached. He held the scissors in one hand, mimicking a playful gesture, waving them around. "Just saying, bro, you'd probably make a whole wig with what you got." Tyrese finally looked up, maintaining a calm demeanor, his eyes steady. He appeared neither scared nor angry, but completely focused. "You good?" Tyrese asked, his voice low. Brent blinked. "What?" "I said, are you good?" Brent stared at him, momentarily disoriented. "You talk now," he snapped, attempting to regain his composure. "Man, whatever." He turned and left, discarding the scissors into a locker as if they held no significance. Yet, Tyrese understood the gesture. It was a display of dominance, a deliberate act. Brent, however, was unprepared for the consequences when the pretense ended. By the start of the second week, a change was palpable. It wasn't overt, nothing that could be documented in an official reprimand. Still, Tyrese sensed it. Entering class, he noticed subtle looks. Not fear, not interest, simply observation. A posture of expectation, as if everyone anticipated a confrontation. He preferred to avoid entanglement. Within Mr. Delano's science lab, he heard a student whisper, "That's the person Brent is involved with." During lunchtime, another student subtly shifted their tray when Tyrese took a seat at the table's end. He remained composed, neither adjusting his position nor expressing any reaction. He simply ate more slowly. One afternoon, while on his way to the library, a seventh grader, a slender boy with braces, approached him near the vending machines. "Hey," the boy said, slightly winded, "are you Tyrese?" Tyrese looked over. He cautioned, "Just, be careful around Brent. He's been speaking about you. Said he intends to make a statement." Tyrese questioned that. "A point?" His companion confirmed, "Yes. He says you believe you're superior to everyone. He's planning to correct you." The young man paused before adding, "He did something to a sixth grader last year. He poured a milkshake on his head during lunch." Everyone laughed. It was quite disturbing. Tyrese acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you." The boy appeared to want to add something, but someone called his name, and he ran off. That evening, Tyrese lay on the living room rug, feet resting on the couch, looking at his phone. His mom was close by, checking papers. "Something on your mind?" she asked without looking up. He hesitated. "Have you ever had someone harass you just to see you react?" She set down her pen and turned to him. "You mean like bullying?" "I mean like they notice you don't join their games, so they force you into one." She paused, allowing the words to linger. "I've encountered individuals like that before," she remarked. "In college, even during my first teaching job, some people struggle to grasp peace unless it aligns with their expectations." He responded, "You maintain your principles. You acknowledge your identity, and you refuse to allow others to compromise your stability." He nodded in agreement. His father entered the room, wiping his hands with a towel. "Do you wish to speak with me?" he inquired directly. Tyrese observed them both, then straightened up. "I thought," his dad said, settling into the chair opposite him. "Is that the boisterous one?" "Yes." "What is he doing?" "Nothing yet. Just comments. Bumping into me. Talking as if he's seeking a reaction." "Is it effective?" Tyrese shook his head. "No, but it's becoming tiresome." His father leaned forward. "Let me tell you something," he said. "The world is full of kids like Brent. It doesn't matter if you're 13 or 30. Some of them have loud voices. Some wear uniforms. Some hide behind keyboards. They all behave similarly. They test and challenge you, attempting to provoke a reaction, either a rash response or retreat," he indicated by tapping his finger on the coffee table. You refrain from either action. You remain composed until they acknowledge they're confronting an unexpected challenge. Tyrese looked at him. Can I strike him? He inquired. If necessary, his dad replied, but not fueled by anger. Never out of anger. You strike to halt the behavior, not to dominate. His mother remained silent, but offered no disagreement either. The following day, Brent passed Tyrese in the hallway and bumped his books from his hand. The papers spread out, fluttering across the tile. Brent smiled, a seemingly accidental gesture. Tyrese bent down, gathering them up individually. Several students paused to observe. Others looked away. Brent remained, waiting. When Tyrese straightened, he remained silent. He simply stared, a prolonged gaze that made Brent blink. What? Tyrese spoke, his tone even, just enough to convey, I see you. I am not afraid of you, and I am not responding as you instructed. Brent's smile disappeared. However, some individuals require explicit clarification, detailed step by step. It was gym day once again, and the locker room was filled with typical middle school activity. Sneakers scraping against the floor, lockers banging, the sound of inexpensive deodorant spraying permeating the space. Tyrese consistently prepared quickly. He entered and exited swiftly, avoiding conversation, showing off, or joking. He approached it as a task. When he entered, Brent was already present, seated on the bench as if expecting someone. It seemed he was the observer now. Tyrese remained composed, located his locker, entered the combination, and concentrated on changing. He sensed eyes on him, not just Brent's, but others as well. Logan, Bryce, and Chadwick. Even some students who typically stayed out of things. Yo, Brent said, rising deliberately. You still rocking those spaghetti ropes on your head? A faint sound, like laughter, rippled through the room, but it lacked strength, as if even amusement had become weary. Tyrese concentrated on his shoes, securing the laces firmly. Brent approached. He retrieved an object from his pocket. Scissors, silver, sharp, and genuine, likely taken from an art class or workshop. Have you ever considered change? Brent inquired, manipulating the scissors with 2 fingers as if they were a plaything. It could tidy you up. You might actually appear normal. Tyrese raised his gaze, his face blank, without a flicker of movement. Brent smiled. Before anyone could intervene, he reached out and cut. A moment of dread. The cut was clean at the base. It fell to the floor like a fallen leaf. Several children gasped. One whispered, yo. For a brief instant, everything paused. Tyrese rose, steadily, without haste, without hesitation. His expression remained unchanged, but something shifted behind his eyes. He looked down at the dread on the floor. Then he looked up at Brent. You think this is amusing? He asked. Brent smirked, slightly. Tyrese did not shout. He did not lash out. He advanced, composed, deliberate, and struck Brent with a quick elbow to the chest. Brent recoiled, astonished, gasping. Before he could respond, Tyrese intervened once more. Rotation, sweep, ascent. Brent fell heavily to the ground, without flourish, without ostentation, simply efficient motion. His father had instructed him in that. Accuracy, not force. Brent attempted to rise. Tyrese positioned a knee on his chest and moved in close. You do not touch me again, he stated. Voice even. Never. The room was utterly silent. It was documented. Naturally, Coach Timmons entered the room just 2 seconds afterward. Tyrese signaled, using a whistle as if they were on a football field. Hey, what's happening? Tyrese retreated. Brent was on the floor, one hand pressed to his ribs, the other still holding the scissors. Coach addressed both boys. Office now. The journey to the principal's office was quiet. Tyrese remained silent. Brent attempted to portray himself as the injured party, murmuring about his intentions and claiming it was merely a joke, his hands visibly shaking. Principal Rossner observed them, her expression stern behind her square glasses. Begin speaking, she instructed. Brent spoke first, attributing the incident to Tyrese, asserting that he reacted inexplicably and it was a misunderstanding. Tyrese remained silent, patiently waiting. Subsequently, He retrieved an item from his pocket and placed it on the desk. A cut dread. He maintained direct eye contact with Principal Rossner. He brought scissors to school. Rossner blinked as he cut my hair. Her face remained still, though her eyes shifted. She then turned to Brent. Is that true? Brent stammered. It was a joke. I wasn't going to actually. You cut his hair? No response was given. I want your parents here. Now. Coach Timmons stood behind them, arms crossed, silent. 20 minutes later, Tyrese's mom arrived, entering calmly, but with firmness. She sat next to her son, placed a hand on his shoulder, and looked the principal directly in the face. Before we say a word, she stated, I want to know if you all understand what this means. Rossner exhaled slowly. We're handling it. You better. But the truth was, this wasn't just a school issue anymore. It was bigger, and it wasn't going away quietly. By that evening, the video had already started making its rounds. It wasn't a long clip, just 10 seconds, but it showed everything. Brent moved forward with scissors. Tyrese advanced, executing a takedown. Following that, there was a close-up shot of Tyrese leaning in, appearing composed and resolute. The quietness in the locker room spoke volumes. The incident spread through group chats and Instagram stories. Even a few students from Northwood High School shared it with captions such as he messed with the wrong one and Brent got folded. Tyrese made no posts about it. He offered no comments. He felt no need to. His parents were seated at the kitchen table, facing Principal Rossner and Brent's parents, Dean and Colleen Granger. Dean was wearing an expensive watch and a blazer with jeans. Colleen had sunglasses resting on her head, as if she had just left the country club brunch. Let's be clear, Dean stated, attempting to take charge of the discussion. Our son made a mistake, but it was simply a prank. Boys his age do not always grasp boundaries. Cutting someone's hair is assault. Tyrese's mother responded, her tone sharp. Not a prank. Dean questioned the situation. Tyrese's dad moved closer. Let me explain, man. I served in the Marines. I've led squads in countries you couldn't find on a map. You know what isn't tolerated, regardless of location? Disrespect, particularly when it's masked with explanations. Colleen moved in her seat. We're just suggesting that maybe your son reacted excessively. Tyrese's mom slowly turned toward her. Repeat that. I'm just saying. Perhaps a less forceful approach would have been preferable. Brent did not inflict any physical harm. Cutting a child's hair without permission is a humiliating act, Rossner finally stated. Regardless of Brent's intentions, the effect is the same. And if it had been your son's hair, Mrs. Granger, I doubt you'd view it as humorous, Dean said, folding his arms. So what's the next step? Will Brent be suspended? He's suspended for 10 days, Rossner replied directly. And, subject to the school board's review, we might consider a longer suspension, Dean remarked. Regarding the incident, Rossner stated it was about bringing a weapon into the school, targeting another student, and provoking violence, not over a haircut. Tyrese remained silent throughout the entire discussion, his hands in his lap and his posture upright. He displayed no signs of gloating or smirking. Outside the room, several students observed through the glass door. News of the event had quickly circulated. The following day at school, Tyrese walked the hallway as he typically did, but a noticeable change was present. Some students acknowledged him with nods. Several people simply moved aside to let him pass. A seventh grader approached and exclaimed, "Yo, that thing you did was crazy." Tyrese continued walking. He had no desire for attention and just wanted to get to class. During math, Logan and Chadwick remained silent, offering no jokes or taunts. Brent's group had dispersed. Lacking their leader, they didn't behave as they usually did. Tyrese took his seat, retrieved his pencil, and began his assignment. That afternoon, as Tyrese left school, a teacher he hadn't known well approached him by the parking lot. "Are you okay?" Tyrese nodded. "I just want you to know what you did. How you handled that. It took strength, not just in the moment, but the way you've carried yourself afterward." "Thanks," Tyrese said. "I'm just trying to keep it steady." The teacher smiled. "That's harder than it looks." But respect earned through silence doesn't fade easily, and Brent was beginning to learn that the hard way. Brent's 10-day suspension felt lengthy for all except him. As he remained at home, Restricted and disheartened, the school continued. He had anticipated students would support him, perhaps dismissing the situation as they typically did. However, a shift occurred. Students weren't simply avoiding him. They were discussing him. Murmurs in the hallways, uncomfortable pauses in group chats, videos circulated with captions such as "Not so tough now" or "Play stupid games." Brent's reputation suffered a significant blow. It fractured. Tyrese continued to be consistently present. Headphones on, locker tidy, assignments completed punctually. He avoided any displays of arrogance or a triumphant demeanor. However, his presence felt more substantial now. Not intimidating, simply resolute, as if he was unyielding. The following week, the school arranged a facilitated meeting between the families. An opportunity to discuss the incident and, at least from the district's perspective, reinstate a conducive learning atmosphere. Tyrese was reluctant to attend. His parents advised him, sometimes the most impactful action is simply being present. And that's what he did. They convened in the counselor's office. It was a small room with a circle of chairs that didn't match. Brent entered with a tense neck and a wounded sense of self. He avoided eye contact with Tyrese. His mother appeared more irritated than regretful. His father wore the familiar smirk, as if he were attending out of duty, not thought. Ms. Harrell, the school counselor, inhaled deeply. We're not here to revisit what occurred. Our intention is to allow everyone the opportunity to share their feelings and discuss how we can proceed. She addressed Brent. Would you like to start? Brent adjusted in his chair. I was simply joking around. There was no intention behind it. Tyrese remained silent. Brent continued. I didn't realize it would be such a significant issue. Tyrese's mom raised an eyebrow. She stated that cutting a boy's hair is a deeply personal act, particularly when that hair symbolizes something beyond mere appearance. Brent mumbled, I wasn't aware of that. Tyrese's father stated, you didn't care to know. That's the difference. Ms. Harrell then addressed Tyrese, asking, would you like to say something? Tyrese looked up, making eye contact with Brent for the first time in the room. I didn't come here to fight, he said quietly. I didn't come here to make friends either. I came here to get through school. Regarding his hair, he added, that's my business. It's part of me. You touched it like it was yours to joke about. Brent shifted in his seat, remaining silent. I didn't strike you due to a loss of control, Tyrese explained. I struck you because you needed to grasp a certain point, and verbal communication wasn't effective. A pause settled over the room. Brent's mother then addressed the group. We have discussed boundaries with him. Have we, Brent? Brent responded with a restrained nod. Yes. Ms. Harrell added, occasionally, consequences provide more valuable lessons than spoken words. She then turned toward Tyrese. Are you satisfied with the current situation? Tyrese gave a slight shrug. I do not require an apology. Brent raised his head. I do apologize, however. Tyrese observed him, not with the intention of causing Brent discomfort, but to understand his delivery. Frankly, Tyrese didn't detect much substance behind the words. Okay, Tyrese stated finally. Then carry it. Carry what? Brent asked, puzzled. The apology? The lesson? The understanding that not everyone will permit you to belittle them and dismiss it with laughter? Tyrese rose. That's all I needed to say. His parents followed him from the room. In the hallway, his father placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't fight in that room, he said, but you still reacted. He continued, but the thing about true strength? It doesn't manifest in punches. It shows up in how you choose to leave. A week later, Crest Hill Middle held a school-wide assembly. Officially, the assembly was about respect and accountability, but everyone understood what caused it. Even teachers were discussing the incident in the break room, though no one voiced it directly. A palpable restlessness filled the gym as students, anticipating a standard presentation and hollow words, grew bored. Then, Principal Rossner took a surprising action. She approached the front without a microphone, relying solely on her voice and a confident stride. We're facing a recent event that has prompted us to reflect, she stated, and the room fell silent. I'm not going to repeat the details of what occurred. My purpose is to discuss the underlying causes and chart a course for moving ahead. She refrained from mentioning any individuals. It wasn't necessary. She emphasized, this school is not a place where power is gained through popularity or intimidation. Respect isn't earned by volume or the number of laughs you receive. It's earned through how you treat others. Even when no one was observing, a few students glanced around, some shifted uncomfortably, but others remained focused. Listening. Tyrese was seated near the back. He didn't withdraw. He didn't exaggerate his presence, either. He simply maintained the posture he now adopted as he walked through the hallways, balanced and steady. Following the assembly, several students approached him. "You all right, man?" One student inquired. "Yeah," Tyrese responded. "You handled that situation differently than I would have," another student observed. Tyrese simply shrugged. A sense of silent acknowledgement began to replace the previous laughter. Even the faculty noticed. Mr. Delano stopped him following science class and remarked, "I hope you're proud of how you conducted yourself." Tyrese smiled and replied, "I'm just trying to be steady." The significant event occurred a few days later during art class. Ms. Ruiz gave the class a project exploring identity, focusing on self-perception and external perception. She indicated the project could take any form, such as a painting, sculpture, or even a college application. Tyrese created a painting, a portrait of a boy with locks, cropped, and one missing. The depiction wasn't conveying sadness or anger, but rather portraying the boy standing tall amidst a storm, with other figures indistinct in the background. When he shared his work, the class fell silent. "I created this," he stated, "because occasionally people fail to understand how profoundly something seemingly insignificant can matter. They dismiss it as mere hair or a simple joke, but it holds deeper meaning. It's about what it symbolizes." The room was silent. Miss Ruiz's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. She simply nodded. That day, after school, Brent walked past him in the hallway, unaccompanied, without his usual entourage or any commotion. He offered a brief glance. Not an apology, not a confrontation, just recognition. Tyrese nodded once. Nothing further. It wasn't a close bond, but it was a respectful separation. Returning home that evening, his mom was preparing sweet potatoes in the kitchen. "Did the art project go well?" she inquired. "Better than well," he replied. His dad entered from the garage. "Did you receive a response regarding your student council essay?" his father asked. "Yes," Tyrese confirmed, smiling. "You're accepted," his father said, pleased. Calmly, proudly. "You deserve that," he said. Afterward, as Tyrese prepared for bed, he gazed into the mirror. One section remained noticeably shorter than the others. He hadn't corrected it. He chose to do it this way, not because he lacked the ability, but because it wasn't necessary. It served as a reminder of the challenges he had already overcome, of what didn't break him, of who he was before, during, and after the storm. Because some conflicts aren't about achieving victory. They're about ensuring the subsequent one doesn't unfold in a similar fashion. If this account resonated with you, evoked an emotion, please share it. A lesson can be found within, and perhaps someone in your circle needs to hear it. Join our mailing list for more stories that speak truth, challenge disrespect, and remind us all what quiet strength truly embodies. She was simply known as the janitor. They ridiculed her for reading while she worked. Then they were stunned when she delivered the valedictorian speech at graduation, revealing everything. At Larchmont Hills Academy, everyone recognized Olivia Cranston and Camille Strathmore. It was understood. They were the daughters of families who traveled by private plane and ate at restaurants where the menus didn't list prices. Their presence in a room prompted people to either rise or avert their gaze, a reaction born of habit, fear, or envy. They weren't malicious, not precisely, but they understood early on that kindness wasn't essential. Politeness was a choice. Deference? It was reserved for individuals who could provide something in return. And for someone like Janice Albury, the reserved black woman with gentle eyes and rough hands, there was no advantage to be found. Janice had been employed at the school for nearly 2 years. Each weekday, she arrived before sunrise and departed well after the final SUV had exited the gated parking lot. She scrubbed the floors, shined the trophies in the main hall, and ensured the restrooms were fresh. She seldom spoke unless addressed, and her voice, when she did, was as tranquil as a still pond. But Camille observed something one day during lunch break. She had forgotten her phone in the chemistry lab, and hurrying back, she noticed Janice in an empty classroom, not tidying, but looking through a large biology textbook, her lips moving as if saying something softly. Camille rested against the door frame and smiled. "I didn't think you were interested in science," she said. Janice looked up. "I'm just reviewing some earlier learning." Camille angled her head. "Are you going to teach now, as well?" Janice smiled. "Not precisely." It began modestly. There were whispered comments and laughter when Janice walked by. Camille told Olivia, and the two created a playful game from it. "Oh, look," Olivia whispered one morning as Janice wheeled her cart past their lunch table. "Einstein with a mop," Camille chuckled. "Probably writing her thesis on floor wax." They laughed a little too loudly. Other students overheard. Some laughed with them. Others avoided eye contact. No one intervened. Janice kept her head down. It was her usual practice. The students overlooked the way her eyes paused on the school crest etched into the wall, her gaze thoughtful rather than resentful. They failed to observe her tendency to listen more than to speak, or her habit of keeping a notebook in the side pocket of her cart, partially filled with notes. One person showed her kindness. Mr. Del Toro, a literature teacher from Fresno who had a fondness for those often overlooked. On one occasion, he observed Janice carefully aligning the copies of To Kill a Mockingbird on a cart just outside his classroom. "You know," he remarked, "most people simply stack them and proceed." Janice offered a slight shrug. "That book warrants more than crooked edges," she said. He chuckled. "I often say that," he stated, then paused. "Have you read it?" Janice responded to his question. "Twice. Initially in high school, and subsequently when I was mature enough to grasp its true significance." He never requested anything further, but from that point forward he would leave a book for her on the bench outside the staff room every other Friday. No message, no inquiries. Nevertheless, the girls persisted. One afternoon, Olivia waited until Janice passed by, then whispered, "I bet she sleeps in the janitor's closet. Probably dreams in Clorox." It wasn't simply impolite, it was unkind. But Janice continued walking, and that disturbed Olivia more than anything. She anticipated embarrassment or anger, or at the very least a reaction. Janice's silence, however, felt inescapable. This made her a figure to be reckoned with. The lights at Northwood High typically dimmed around 8 p.m. Most evenings, though a few always remained lit, sufficient to create long shadows across the marble corridors. It was during these hours that Janice seemed to transform. As the classrooms fell silent and the usual teenage bustle subsided, she would move her cart into the supply closet, change into a clean shirt, and bring her notebook to room 114. Room 114 was no longer designated for a specific class. It had a flickering light and one desk leg shorter than the others. Most teachers steered clear of it. However, Janice had adopted it. The door did not lock, and that was acceptable. She didn't require privacy. She simply needed space. She would retrieve her laptop, a 6-year-old Dell lacking the N key, and sign into her coursework. She was 6 credits shy of finishing a degree in educational leadership through an accelerated adult program offered by the same university that operated Larchmont Hills Academy. A small, understated provision located within the staff handbook provided full scholarships to employees who worked a minimum of 30 hours a week. Most staff members overlooked it. Janice had not. It wasn't about ambition at this point. The focus was on completing a project that had been halted years prior. This was a time when she possessed a child, a husband, and a secure job in Maryland, only to lose all three within 18 months. Life has a way of deflating you before you're aware you've been holding your breath. She never expressed her struggles to anyone. It wasn't a behavior she'd been taught. Occasionally, late at night, she would receive a message from her sister in Detroit. "You sleeping or still playing superhero?" Janice would respond with a photo of her textbook and a brief message. Chapter 6 is proving difficult. Her sister would then send a laughing emoji, followed by, "You're still the smartest person I know." Don't let those stuck-up girls get to you. She never shared with her sister the full extent of the difficulties. She omitted the incident where Camille accidentally knocked over the bucket of dirty water and seemed to find amusement as Janice knelt to clean it. There was also the incident when Olivia confided in a group of parents during a school tour, suggesting the institution favored hiring individuals with charitable backgrounds. Yet, Janice persisted. She consistently arrived 5 minutes early. Her car was always spotless, her uniform immaculate. She possessed patience but lacked innocence. Her understanding of the school's customs surpassed that of the students. Beneath the refined wooden interiors and carefully selected diversity pamphlets, there existed a decay. Not everyone, naturally, but sufficiently pervasive to permeate the atmosphere. Janice had no intention of rectifying it. Her task was simple: observe, listen, and document. Unbeknownst to the students, and even the staff, Janice had been selected for a role extending beyond cleaning floors. 2 years prior, following an internal report alleging the Academy's neglect of racial and economic discrimination, the Board of Trustees approved a discreet strategy. They decided to place someone within the school, silently. Someone who wouldn't attract attention. Someone who could witness everything. While working part-time at a community college in Oakland, Janice received a job offer. The position came with no title or special privileges, simply an ID badge, a mop, and a defined purpose. That purpose was to observe, to take notes, and to document the patterns of behavior that were not able to be captured in policy memos or camera footage. The work was not glamorous. However, it was significant, and late at night, with her coursework open in one window and her field notes in another, Janice recorded everything. It wasn't only the cruelty, but the indifference, the smiles that vanished the moment someone turned away. She also wrote about the good teachers, the limited number of students who met her gaze. She recalled how Mr. Del Toro left that copy of Beloved with a sticky note that said, "For someone who understands silence." Still, each shift drained her, not from the labor itself, but from a necessity of feigning. She bore their ignorance as a second uniform, and with each passing day, it became increasingly burdensome. A change was on the horizon, though not as they anticipated. By early spring, the students at Larchmont Hills Academy were already largely disengaged. Señoritas had arrived gradually, like a dense fog, subtle, pervasive, and self-satisfied. Olivia and Camille frequently spent their days in the senior lounge, examining college acceptance emails and making critical remarks about those they perceived as inferior. However, subtle comments were no longer sufficient. The initial excitement had faded. They desired a significant reaction. On a Monday morning, Camille entered the admin office and pretended to be worried. "I think the janitor's been stealing test copies," she whispered to the front desk clerk, making her voice sound very low. "I saw her in a classroom late at night, alone." Ms. Robbins looked surprised. "Janice, are you certain?" Camille adopted her most innocent expression. "I don't want to cause problems for anyone, but this school is supposed to be secure, isn't it?" It was a carefully planned action. If anything resulted from it, so much the better. A sense of unease lingered. That afternoon, Janice was summoned to the operations office. The interaction was presented as a standard procedure with no direct accusations. She remained composed as the facility's manager reviewed his notes, visibly ill at ease. "We simply wanted to inquire if you've been present in unoccupied classrooms during your shift," he stated. "I clean all classrooms assigned to me." Janice responded directly. "Yes, but do you remain longer? For any purpose?" He maintained eye contact. "I complete my assigned tasks. Occasionally, I require a brief respite, as do most people." He acknowledged this with a nod and made a note. "Very well, that concludes the discussion." Janice rose. "Should any questions arise regarding my work, I would welcome a straightforward discussion." The gentleman's cheeks flushed slightly. "There are no concerns. Simply, you understand procedure." It was a flimsy fabrication, and both were aware of it. Outside the office, Janice located Camille resting against the wall, feigning interest in her phone. The smile offered was not amicable. "Everything's satisfactory, Miss Albury?" Her tone was saccharine. Janice remained unmoved. It was more effective than one might expect. Camille's face faltered briefly, then quickly returned to its characteristic sneer. However, this was no longer a trivial matter. Camille and Olivia had matured observing individuals evade consequences. This fostered their confidence and impulsiveness. 2 days elapsed before Olivia planned a further incident. She let a silver necklace fall near the janitor's closet and then dramatically announced its disappearance from her locker during lunch. A small crowd assembled. She raised her wrist in a theatrical gesture. "I'm certain I had it in there earlier today," she declared. "I suppose it could be lost permanently," Camille observed. Their friends chuckled, some visibly anxious. "Perhaps check the mop bucket," they joked. However, when one of the admin staff overheard the remark and volunteered to investigate, Olivia quickly recanted. "No, I'm sure I simply misplaced it. It's nothing significant," she said. The immediate concern subsided, but the awkwardness remained. That evening, Mr. Del Toro walked past Janice in the hallway. He stopped. "You're doing okay," he said. Janice looked up from her card. "You've been here long enough to know the games these kids play," he sighed. "Too long sometimes." There was a pause. "Is there anything I can do?" She thought for a moment. "Keep doing what you're doing. That's rare enough." What neither of them knew, what no one knew, was that Janice had already sent her first internal report to the board. Documented dates, quotes, and behavior patterns were observed. Names redacted for now, but she wasn't the only one being monitored anymore. An independent firm had initiated discrete audits. These audits included interviews and surveys presented as student engagement questionnaires. Camille and Olivia believed they had complete control over the school, but attention was shifting. Rumors began to change their focus. Despite this, the girls continued their actions. Cruelty had developed into a pattern, and patterns are difficult to change when they have never faced repercussions. Then, one Friday, Janice heard something that stopped her. In the lounge, behind a cracked door, Camille was speaking to a boy from the tennis team. "You know that janitor, Janice?" she said. "My mom says people like her are just here to make the place look diverse." She referred to it as optics. The boy laughed. Olivia added, "My dad said the school's bleeding money giving those scholarship perks to staff. It's basically charity," Camille scoffed. Unable to repair the situation with books, Janice stood quietly, 1 foot still in the hallway, one hand gripping the edge of her cart. She said nothing, but something within her shifted. She had been patient long enough, but now she had everything she needed, and it was almost time to show them. Before she was sweeping floors under fluorescent lights, Janice Albury had been someone else entirely. 12 years prior, she held the position of Director of Curriculum Development for a public school district in Maryland, known then as Janice Simmons. Her responsibilities included managing a corner office, overseeing 3 staff members, and proudly displaying a plaque from the state superintendent. She was married and a mother. Life at that time possessed a sense of order and comfort. However, that changed with a tragic event. Her husband Carr was struck by a delivery truck on I-83 during a snowstorm. He perished in the accident. Her daughter, Kira, who was 6 years old at the time, survived, though with significant injuries. After 2 months spent in a hospital bed, Janice faced a year of surgeries and rehabilitation. While insurance covered a significant portion of the expenses, some costs remained. Janice drew upon her savings, her retirement funds, and ultimately sold their home. Following this, Kira developed pneumonia, which tragically led to her passing. Janice resigned from her job 2 weeks following the funeral. The sight of a school brought back the image of Kira's empty chair, and the sound of children's laughter in the hallways served as a painful reminder of her loss. She moved around, taking temporary work, staying with friends, then in rented rooms, ultimately settling into a small studio apartment in Antioch, California. Despite these changes, she consistently read and continued learning. This pursuit led her to discover a program, a little-known educational equity initiative offered through a university partnership, representing a fresh opportunity. When asked if she would agree to work undercover to examine behavioral differences between students from privileged backgrounds and faculty perspectives, she readily accepted. She acted not out of financial need, but because the system had let down too many individuals resembling her. She refused to accept this inaction. Applying for the janitorial position using her maiden name, she successfully completed the background checks, keeping her degree and credentials secured in a folder at home. Initially, her goal was simply to observe and listen, to remain unnoticed. She had no plan to participate. The incidents she witnessed were disheartening. A senior teacher deriding a student with a speech impediment under the assumption of privacy. Discussions about a girl's financial aid occurred at a staff meeting, presented as a personal failing. Then there were Camille and Olivia, whose parents' substantial donations had secured the gymnasium's naming rights in honor of a hedge fund. Their self-assurance stemmed not from conceit, but from a sense of privilege. Janice felt disheartened by what she observed. Eleanor Larchmont, the school's founder, had originally conceived of the academy as a place for future leaders from all backgrounds. However, that original vision had diminished over time, obscured by financial influence, promotional efforts, and preferential admissions practices. Consequently, Janice began her work. Her notebook rapidly filled with detailed observations, specific dates, recurring linguistic patterns, staff reactions. She consistently attended faculty meetings when possible, choosing to sit in the rear of the room. She posed inquiries that prompted discomfort among those present. She took on committee assignments that others avoided. Steadily and carefully, she became the source of information the board required. And during evenings, as the halls became vacant, she studied. She wasn't simply observing, she was revitalizing herself. Each finished module advanced her progress toward that second degree. Each submitted essay felt like rediscovering a part of the woman she once was. During one evening spent reviewing a case study about institutional gatekeeping, a particular sentence caught her attention. It stated that genuine authority doesn't proclaim itself, it waits to be recognized. She emphasized this line with underlines. Graduation was approaching rapidly, just 3 weeks away. She had finished the program without drawing much attention. Her grade point average ranked her among the highest in her group. The board had previously approved her to address the audience. Camille and Olivia continued to walk through the halls with an air of confidence, unaware of what was about to unfold. The faculty, too, were on the verge of a realization that learning extends beyond the classroom. Janice had observed them for 2 years. Now, she was poised to step forward, taking the central position, and they would be completely surprised. That morning, the sky above Antioch was clear, excessively bright considering the anxiety some individuals brought into the Larchmont Hills Academy Auditorium. Families occupied the seats, proud parents filled with anticipation and clutching phones, surrounded by flowers, ties, and costly perfume. The scene appeared flawless. Camille Strathmore wore a champagne-colored stole that her mother had flown in from France. Olivia Cranston had her hair professionally styled before dawn, her makeup applied to endure the entire day. They smiled for photographs, laughed with joy, and stood with the grace of young women who'd been raised to believe the world was within their reach. Behind the scenes, Janice remained still in her black robe. There were no embellishments, no unnecessary details. She declined the academic award the committee presented, stating she had no need for it. What she desired was a single moment, just one, and that moment had arrived. The dean, Dr. Leonard, approached her, holding a program. "Ready, Ms. Albury?" She met his gaze. She had been prepared. He offered a restrained smile and returned toward the podium. Camille and Olivia did not even look at her as they passed by in their elegant gowns. It was understandable. She was unnoticed once more, simply an element of the surroundings. The ceremony commenced as it always did. Names were announced, families applauded, and speeches were delivered. The school's jazz trio performed something gentle and unremarkable. Subsequently, Dr. Leonard approached the microphone. As we approach the end of this year's commencement, we have a particularly noteworthy announcement, one that, intentionally, has remained private until this moment. Students adjusted in their seats. Parents moved closer. Even faculty appeared puzzled. This year, the Board of Trustees authorized a confidential academic pilot program meant to enable working staff at our institution to pursue higher education with complete anonymity. The program demands both academic excellence and professional integrity of the highest order. Camille glanced at Olivia. Olivia showed a frown. Murmurs began behind them. Dr. Leonard proceeded. We are pleased to announce that the highest academic honor this year goes not to a student you might have learned alongside, but to someone many of you overlooked. He paused, then stated distinctly, "Please welcome Janice Albury, this year's valedictorian." A stillness hung in the air. Then, with a suddenness like a glass shattering in a quiet room, the news arrived. People turned their heads, their mouths agape. Camille remained motionless, her expression rigid. Olivia blinked, then attempted a laugh, only to find herself laughing alone. Janice proceeded deliberately to the stage. Her movements were controlled, her posture upright. She avoided looking at the assembled group until she reached the podium. Then, she surveyed the audience slowly, her gaze finally fixing on Camille and Olivia. Following this, she began to speak. I arrived at this school with a mop in one hand and a question lingering in my thoughts. Her voice resonated, strong and clear, without any doubt. I found myself questioning the true nature of this institution. Beyond the official statistics, the promotional materials, and the presentations, I wanted to determine if respect was readily available here, or if it was something that needed to be gained only by those who possessed the appropriate attire, footwear, and family names. The auditorium was completely silent. I dedicated countless evenings tidying up after those who spoke negatively about me. And when they observed me reading a book or attending a classroom session after hours, they mocked. She paused. However, my focus extended beyond mere reading. I was observing, studying, not solely to earn a degree, but to uncover solutions. She turned slightly toward the faculty, and now I possessed them. Students surveyed the room, adjusting in their places. Olivia's expression remained inscrutable. Camille clutched her program firmly, her knuckles white. Janice lifted her chin. I stand here today, not just as your valedictorian, but as a reflection of the very things that Elmwood High claims to stand for: growth, opportunity, and truth. But she hadn't revealed everything yet, and what she said next would change the room forever. You could hear a cough from 3 rows back. A chair creaked. A phone buzzed quietly against someone's hip, but no one moved to check it. A hush fell over the room as people leaned in, anticipating Janice's next words. She proceeded deliberately, taking a drink of water, briefly reviewing her notes, and neatly folding them. Then, she raised her gaze. I'm sure some of you are wondering how I came to be here. She began, gesturing to her robe and the podium. A few members of the front row, largely faculty, nodded in agreement, seemingly unaware they had done so. My presence here wasn't solely for the purpose of earning a degree, she added. 2 years ago, the university board contacted me following concerns raised, discreetly, privately, regarding the increasing atmosphere of class division and privilege within Ashworth Academy. They requested I consider a position, but not as a faculty member, not as a consultant, as a janitor. At this, the room shifted. Janice allowed the silence to linger. My purpose was to observe. Away from executive suites and scheduled gatherings, I observed. In the corridors, the athletic facilities, the classrooms buzzing with after-hours conversations where students felt safe to speak openly, believing they were unobserved. I was attentive. A woman among the parents visibly expressed discomfort. Over a period, I noted seemingly minor incidents. Yet, these minor incidents accumulated. I saw how some students treated those they perceived as outsiders. I noticed how the lack of intervention from adults permitted that behavior to escalate, and how some of you, who should have been more informed, chose to ignore it. She looked toward the staff. Some of you were aware, and you remained silent. The words struck with force. Camille's mouth felt parched. Olivia had ceased breathing through her nose. She remained motionless, as if blinking would make her vanish. The most troubling aspect, Janice continued, is that the behavior was not concealed. It was open, commonplace, accepted, and frequently it was encouraged, amid smiles, with focus, and with widespread recognition. She paused, taking a moment. I'm not here to criticize you. I'm here to offer a reminder. Her tone became gentler. You cannot determine someone's worth based on their clothing or their profession. You cannot assess dignity through financial status or lineage. She lowered her gaze briefly, then raised her head with renewed focus. I once had a daughter. Her name was Kira. She would have been your age now. A stillness fell over the audience, similar to a chilling breeze. She passed away before she had the opportunity to wear a cap and gown. I'm not sharing this to elicit sympathy. I am sharing it because I see her in all of you. I see who she could have become. And I wonder, if she had been here, would she have been ridiculed as well? No one dared respond. Perhaps not. However, what I know for certain is that if you depart here today believing the world will defer to your name, you have already failed. She paused again. Education is not merely about books and tests. Remember how you handle the individual you believe you'll never require assistance from, because life possesses a peculiar tendency to shift unexpectedly. Subsequently, the final setback occurred. I have delivered my conclusive report to the board. My assessment has led to a restructuring of the scholarship program, emphasizing integrity and contribution rather than legacy. A comprehensive audit of disciplinary cases spanning the last 5 years will be conducted, and students involved in harassment, encompassing verbal and social forms, will be subject to formal reviews. A subtle vibration resonated from the rear. Several parents murmured amongst themselves, their voices becoming more audible. Janice moved back a little. This isn't retribution, it's accountability. She fixed her attention on Camille, then Olivia, who had lowered her gaze to the floor. And accountability is not swayed by the wealth of your father. However, that wasn't the finality of the matter, as repercussions would follow even after the applause subsided. The ceremony concluded with noticeably diminished enthusiasm compared to its start. Some students applauded, while others seemed unsure how to react. A small number of families, appearing uneasy, left the room before the conclusion. However, Janice maintained her composure, smiling as she returned to her place. It wasn't the back row where she previously observed, but rather near the front, alongside board members and professors who now regarded her with a noticeable change, respect. Camille did not speak as she departed the auditorium. Her father was already waiting close to the car, his expression stern, avoiding her gaze. Olivia's mother, arms crossed, stood by the valley in stunned silence. There were no congratulations, no flowers, just silence. Inside, a small crowd had gathered around Janice. Teachers who had previously offered only a polite greeting were now shaking her hand. Mr. Del Toro remained at a respectful distance, waiting for an opportune moment. You didn't simply speak, he stated when they eventually talked. You transformed the entire atmosphere. Janice looked at him and smiled softly. The air had needed changing. Upon the lawn, several of the younger students expressed their awe. A girl wearing a red dress confided to her friend, "I wasn't aware she attended school," to which her friend responded, "I didn't know she could articulate herself so eloquently." A sense of belated recognition began to spread, an acknowledgement of what had been missed, what had been consciously disregarded. That evening, Janice was in her apartment, with a plastic container of leftover chicken salad and the commencement program placed on the table next to her. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from the board's director. The subject line read, "Thank you." The message stated, "Your final report is being reviewed. Policy meetings begin next week. Your courage will shape the future of this school." She set the phone down and exhaled. It wasn't relief, it wasn't pride, but a quiet, grounded sense of purpose. The kind that didn't require applause or accolades. Meanwhile, news about the graduation speech spread quickly. A video shared online by a teacher's assistant was already spreading among parents and alumni. The title was straightforward, "Janitor or Genius?" Larchmont's graduation shocker. Regarding Camille and Olivia, Camille was required to attend a disciplinary review. Her parents were obligated to participate. A scheduled summer internship at her father's firm was discreetly canceled. It was rumored that she would be asked to fulfill community service hours before receiving her diploma. Olivia's parents initially resisted, indicating they would pursue legal action and requesting apologies. However, upon the school sharing portions of Janice's records, containing witness statements and documented incidents, they ceased their objections. Olivia was permitted to graduate, although her honors were removed. Both girls remained silent regarding the matter, but those familiar with them observed a change. The teasing ended, and the hushed conversations also stopped. The following fall, Janice received a new opportunity, the role of Director of Equity and Inclusion Initiatives for the school district. She agreed to take the position. On her final day, as she walked the halls with her cart, she placed a sticky note on the supply closet door. It read, "Respect isn't owed, it's revealed." With clean floors, clear eyes, J.A., and a final goodbye, she left the mop behind. Leaving Larchmont Hills, she wore a navy blazer and carried a satchel, not to demonstrate professional advancement, but because she felt no further need for discretion. 1 week later, she returned, not in a work uniform, but as a guest speaker for the new staff orientation. Standing at the podium again, she addressed the teachers, new hires, and assistants. "Your job title doesn't determine your influence," she stated. "How you treat people when no one's looking does." Her voice resonated to the back of the room, and this time, everyone was attentive because they finally grasped the meaning. Respect isn't about volume, it's about the impact you make. If this story resonated with you, if it prompted you to reconsider how we treat people, we believe it's sufficient. Subscribe to the channel, share this story, and discuss it. The world would benefit from more individuals with qualities similar to Janice's, and it's valuable to remember that the most reserved person present could impart the most significant lessons.